The Master, I make mention of you. We continue the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. For the mind stuff, when changed, by receiving the image, chaya, of the intelligent expressions, of the intelligence experiences, pleasures and pains. Hence the supposition that experience is in the self, because of the assumption, graha, of an identity of the mind stuff and the self. Such is the very nature of these mental pleasures and pains, which originate in dependence upon their own causes, that they themselves remember and experience later the consequence, while others do not remember. And the very natures of these mental pleasures and pains ought not to be an injunction in the yoga, so that one says, let this be so, or let this not be so, nor should it be a question, paryanu yoga, so that one asks, why is this not so, to him who will not be satisfied with what has already been said. He speaks with the words, moreover, his own self, the idea I, is bound up with the mind stuff, which is not distinguished from the idea, and is the substrate of experience, and of memories of experience, that have qualities of originating and of ceasing, however varied they may be. How can this idea be attached to ideas that are absolutely distinguished from itself? It might be objected that inasmuch as there is a distinction between the two causes, one, the process of knowing and direct perception, and two, memory, inasmuch as there is a coherence, some sarga, of the two contradictory qualities of immediate perceptibility and of mediate perceptibility, the so-called recognition that this was that, prat yab jnana, is not a single idea, that there could be a unity of the mind stuff which contains these contradictory ideas. For this reason, he says, in one's own experience, the objector might reply that 1. The distinction between the two causes, and 2. The coherence between two contradictory causes have been mentioned as inhibiting this, one's own experience. In reply to this, he says, moreover, of a perception not. The totalities of causes, samagri, do not remain distinct on one condition only, that they are reduced to terms, anusara, of perception, and that the totalities of causes do not remain distinct is not contradicted by the fact that the qualities are immediate perceptibility. This is shown to be consistent in the Nyayakarnika, and the action of objects is intended by a mind stuff that is not momentary, is shown to be consistent in the Nyayakarnika and in the Brahmatattvasa Miksa. This is all made clear, of which stable mind stuff this purification is enjoined by the system. By what means is this? So human systems, we kind of expect contradictions to arise, and instead of saying, oh, it's the contradictory nature of reality, we should be saying, it's flawed, and therefore, to some degree, we got to be willing to change it. But the That from the Itra. Different story, right? 33. By the cultivation of friendliness towards happiness and compassion, towards pain and joy, towards merit and indifference towards demerit, the yogin should attain the undisturbed calm of the mind stuff. Of these four, he should cultivate friendliness towards all living beings that have reached the experience of happiness, compassion towards those in pain, joy towards those whose character is meritorious, indifference towards those whose character is demeritorious. When he thus cultivates friendliness and the rest, the white quality of karma comes into being within him, and then the mind stuff becomes calm. And when calm, it becomes single in intent and reaches the stable state. Remember what I said in my white initiation. Because one whose central organ is unpurified and full of such feelings as jealousy cannot successively, sampatte, effect concentration and the means of concentration, he proceeds to set forth the means of securing undisturbed calm of the mind, which are hostile to such as feelings as jealousy. This he does by saying of which stable mind stuff this. In other words, of the stable mind stuff, this is the perfection. The sutra begins with the words 33. Friendliness and compassion, and ends with the words undisturbed calm. When towards those who are happy, the mind stuff cultivates friendliness, that is cordiality, then the taint of envy ceases. When towards those who are in pain, the mind stuff cultivates compassion, that is a desire to destroy pain in another as if it were his own, then the taint of a desire to injure others ceases from the mind. When towards living creatures, whose disposition is meritorious, the mind cultivates joy, that is gladness, then the taint of jealousy ceases. When towards those whose disposition is demeritorious, the mind cultivates indifference, that is neutrality, then the taint of wrath ceases. And then, after the qualities, dharma, made of rajas and of tamas, have ceased, the white quality made of sattva comes into being. One may say that he becomes endowed with the superiority of sattva, when there can properly be said to be paksa, a restriction of the fluctuations. His mind stuff because its true nature is undisturbed calm, becomes undisturbedly calm. 33. By the cultivation of friendliness towards happiness and compassion towards pain and joy, towards merit and indifference towards demerit, the undisturbed calm of the mind stuff. And when undisturbedly calm, by means which are to be stated, it becomes single in intent and gains the stable state. But if there be no cultivation of friendliness and the other feelings, these means are not adequate for stability. 34. Or he gains stability by expulsion and retention of breath. Expulsion is the ejection of the abdominal air through the apertures of the nose by a special kind of effort. Retention is restraint of the breath, or by these two he should attain to a stability of the central organ. He now states these means of obtaining stability, 34, are by expulsion and retention of breath. The word or signifies that there is a choice with regard to other means, now to be stated, but not with regard to cultivation of friendliness and of the other feelings, because the alternatives now mentioned are in addition to the cultivation. He explains the expulsion by the saying of the abdominal by a special kind of effect described in books of yoga, by means which the abdominal wind is gradually emitted through the apertures of the nose. He explains retention by saying retention is restraint of the breath. It is restraint of that portion of the abdominal wind that is emitted breath. It is the keeping of it outside. That is, on the other hand, not allowing it to enter suddenly. By these two, the expulsions and retention of wind, his body becomes light, and his central organ gains the stable state. And in this sutra, we have to supply a thirst. The word stability from the phrase comes into a relation of stability found in the next sutra, and this is to be connected with the words should attain, as it is understood from the context artha. 35. Are he gains stability when a sense of activity, pravritti, arises, connected with an object, and bringing the central organ into a relation of stability. The consciousness of supernormal, divya, odor in one who attains fixedly to the tip of his nose is sense activity with odor as an object. On the tip of the tongue, the consciousness of supernormal taste. On the palate, supernormal color. On the middle of the tongue, the consciousness of touch. On the root of the tongue, the consciousness of sound. These sense activities, when arisen, bring the mind stuff into a relation of stability and dispel doubt and become a way of approach to concentrated insight. Thus, sense activity with regard to the moon, are the sun, our planets, our gems, are the rays of a lamp, are similar objects, when it arises, should be regarded as being connected with an object. For although the true nature of things, as they really are, becomes accessible by means of the various sciences, and by inferences, and by the instruction of masters, since these means are adequate to inform us of things as they are, still so long as any part whatsoever has not become consciously knowable by the appropriate organ, the whole seems immediately perceived. And when the thinking substance is not made to arise firmly with regard to such subtle intended objects as release, therefore, if only for the sake of reinforcing books and inference and the instruction of masters, some one particular thing must necessarily be made an object of perception. Then, after a portion of the intended object, as taught by these three means, has been made the object of perception, the whole, even unto such an exceeding subtle object as release, is thoroughly believed. For precisely this purpose, the purification of the mind stuff is enjoyed. If there are fluctuations unrestrained, as contrasted with this portion, then, when the consciousness of being master with regard to these has been produced, the mind stuff would be adequate to effect a perception of these various intended objects, and this done, the yogin will, without hindrance, acquire belief and energy and mindfulness and concentration. See Book 1, number 20. He tells of another means for stability. R. A sense activity arises connected with an object, bringing the central organ into a relation with stability. Now, even when a text is preserved, the believing and following of the text is not the purpose. It's the function. And going beyond the function, right? What are the results? What is the spirit of it? He explains by saying, in one who attends fixedly to the tip of his nose. In one performing fixed attentions and contemplations and concentrations, there arises, as a result of success in these, that direct perception, which is a supernormal consciousness of odors. Similarly, what is said is applicable to the other sense activities also, and this is to be believed on the strength of the authoritative word, and not from probable reasonings. Upapatitas. An objection. This may be so, but of what use is this kind of fluctuation, which are no service as regards isolation? In reply, he says, these fluctuations, when once arisen, in a very short time, bring the mind stuff into a relation of stability with the object, whether it be the Ishvara or the discernment. Now let's remember to distinguish the Ishvara from Ishvara from the Ishvara, the purified self, the self-mastered self, yourself. The aware and master, yes. Ability, awareness, yeah. Another objection. How could a fluctuation in relation to one object bring the mind stuff into a relation of stability with another object? In reply to this, he says, dispel doubt. It dispels, that is, it removes. Consequently, it becomes a way of approach to concentrated insight. By the word thus, he shows by analogy that other fluctuations arise, which are taught in the revealed word, can be made objects. If it be objected, whence can there be a doubt with regard to matters made known by revealed word and by other authorities? He replies by the words, for yoga is based upon belief, and when a portion of the intended objects taught is made, the object of perception, contemplation, and the other states which are based upon this belief follow for him without obstruction. 36. Are an undistressed and luminous sense activity when arisen brings the central organ into a relation of stability. The words sense activity, when arisen, brings the central organs into a relation of stability, are supplied from Sutra 35. This is that consciousness of the thinking substance which occurs when the yogin fixes his attention upon the lotus of heart, the lotus of the heart. For one, the sattva of the thinking substance becomes resplendent and all-pervasive like the air, akacha. By still in keeping his central organ stable in this lotus, this sense activity, because resplendent as the sun, or the moon, or the planets, or the gems, becomes transformed in appearance. Thus, too, his mind stuff comes to a state of balance with regard to the feeling of personality and becomes waveless like the great sea, and peaceful and infinite, and the feeling of personality and not besides, with regard to which it has been said, pondering upon this self, which is a mere atom, one is conscious in the same way as when one is conscious to the extent that one says, I am. This undistressed sense activity is of two kinds, one in connection with an object, and two, the feeling of personality and not besides, and is called luminous, by means of which the mind stuff of the yogin gains the stable state. 36. Are an undistressed luminous, without distress means freed from pain. Luminous means something having illumination. Luminous in the form of casting radiance upon the lotus of the heart. That lotus is 8-petaled, which is situated with head downwards between the abdomen and the thorax. He should turn by the force of an emissive restraint of breath, head upwards, and fix the mind stuff attentively upon it. In the middle of this lotus is the circle of the sun and the letter A, and the locus of the waking state. Above it is the circle of the moon and the letter U, and the locus of sleep. Above this is the circle of fire and the letter M, and the locus of deep sleep. What does M look like? You got that thing there, and you got that thing there, and you got that. So a different letter, but sun, moon, fire, kind of. Above which is the highest, whose essence is the air, the prolonged nasal, Brahmananda, and the locus of the fourth, Turiya state, and a half measure. All this the knowers of Brahma relate. In this lotus, that is the pericarp of the lotus, is the tube, Nagni, of Brahma, with upturned face, and reaching to the circle of the sun and the other circles, and upwards from there extends the tube called Sushumna. This passes through the outer circles, also beginning with that of the sun. Now this tube is the locus of the mind stuff. By fixing attention upon this tube, the yogin acquires, in addition, the consciousness of mind stuff. After showing the consistency of his statement, he indicates what the appearance of the consciousness of the thinking substance is by saying, for one, the sattva of the thinking substance. The words like the air, akacha, describe its pervasive character. It takes various forms. It is transformed into the appearance, that is, into the form of the splendors of such as the sun. And here thinking, substance, is understood to be the central organ, manas, and not the great principle, mahat tattva, moreover placed in the Sushumna, and produced from the personality substance, which is itself evolved from sattva. It has an abundance of sattva. For this reason, its luminosity is emphasized. Furthermore, insofar as it is concerned with various objects, its pervasiveness is also established, having shown the state of balance, samapatte, with regard to the central organ, an effect of the feeling of personality. He describes what the sense of balance is in itself with regard to the feeling of personality by saying, thus comes to a state of balance, peaceful that is, from which the waves of Rajas and Tamas have passed away, infinite, is all-pervading. The feeling of personality, and not besides, is a form in which the splendors of various kinds do not recur. He makes his own opinion accord with another authoritative work, Agama, by saying, with regard to which, this has been said by Panchaka. It is called an atom because it is hard of access to knowledge. The self has the personality substance as its basis. Pondering, that is, reflecting upon it, one knows in the same way one knows I am. A lot of people say I am. Let's not pretend it's what some people might say, I am. Oh, see, the guy said the phrase I am. It's like, well, I'm this, I'm that. Everybody says I am. And if he's quoting God, that explains a lot of what you have to say. Jesus said, like, oh, wait, the prophets are giving the message of God? Okay. It clears up this idea of Jesus saying that he was God. An objector says this may be true that the luminous sense activity assumes various forms of splendor, but how can the luminous sense activity assume the form of the feeling of personality and not besides? In reply to this, he says, this is of two kinds. The point is that the sense of personality is itself, when cleansed from the defilement of rajas and tamas, illumination. He states that the consequences of the twofold luminous activity by saying, by means of which, 37, or the mind stuff reaches the stable state by having as its object a mind stuff freed from passion, are influenced by having as the supporting object a mind stuff freed from passion. The yogin's mind stuff reaches the stable state, 37, are the mind stuff by having as its object freed from passion. Those freed from passion are Krishna, Dva'e Payana, and certain others. Mind stuff is affected by having as the supporting object the mind stuff of these. Now, if we look at different names of God, we can think of different parts of the body, but again, it's not like, well, God the merciful resides here and God the punisher resides here, and it's not quite like that, but a symbolic arrangement. There doesn't have to be any problem with that. 38. Are the mind stuff reaches the stable state by having as the supporting object a perception in dream or in sleep, are assuming that form which it has as its supporting object either a perception in dream or in sleep. The yogin's mind stuff reaches the stable state. 38. Are by having as the supporting object a perception in dream or in sleep. For when in his dream he adores the exalted Maheshvara's image, which abides within a sequestered forest, and seems as if it were sculpted out of the moon's orb, and its members and limbs are soft as lotus stems. It is made of precious moonstone gems, and festooned with garlands of exceeding fragrant jasmine and malati flowers. It captivates the heart. Well, the images are only symbolic. It's not like God looks like that. And let's be careful of graven images. This is God's image. Everything's belonging to God. It's like when in the very act of adoration, he awakens with mind in undisturbed calm, then reflecting upon that same image, which had become the object supporting the perception in his dream. While his central organ is identical in form with that object, his mind stuff reaches a stable state in that very condition, and sleep in this case is to be understood as having the quality of sattva, of which sleep, when he wakes, he has the connecting memory, I slept well. For in this sleep, his central organ has become single in intent, and to this extent only, that is a sleep tainted only insofar as it refers to some sattva aspect of a thing. The knowers of Brahma tell us that the form of Brahma is in a state of deep sleep. Moreover, since perception severed from the object to be perceived cannot come within the range of the sense organ, he brings that object which is to be perceived within the range of the sense organ. 39. R. The mind stuff reaches the stable state by contemplation upon any such object as desired. Let the yogin contemplate whatever object he desires. Having reached stability there, the mind stuff reaches the stable state elsewhere also. And by a yogin doing this, you know it's part of the spiritual relationship, right? 39. R. By contemplation upon any such an object as is desired. Why say more? Whatsoever object is desired, let him contemplate just that, whichsoever particular entity it be. 40. His mastery extends from the smallest atom to the greatest magnitude. Religion is a relationship with the smallest to the greatest, and God being closer than the smallest creation, and more distant than the greatest. But the mind stuff, entering into a subtle thing, reaches a stable state which extends to the smallest atom. Entering a coarse thing, it reaches a stable state which extends to the greatest magnitude. This freedom from the destruction of his, while advancing in this way to both of these kinds of limits, is complete mastery. So the yogin's mind stuff, filled of mastery, needs not again the purification perfected by practice. But how is this becoming oneself, atmi bhava, to be understood as being a stable state? In reply, he says, his mastery extends from the smallest atom to the greatest magnitude. He explains by saying, into a subtle thing, summarizing the meaning given above, that he tells the meaning of the word mastery by the words both of these kinds. He tells of the secondary results of mastery by saying, so, of mastery. Now when the mind has reached stability, what is the balanced state? Samapatti. As such, svarupa and va, as directed to an object. This is told in the Sutra 41. The mind stuff from which, as from a precious gem, fluctuations have dwindled away, is with reference either to the knower, or to the process of knowing, or to the object to be known, in the state of resting upon one of these three, and in the state of being tinged by one of these three, and thus is in the balanced state. And the meaning of the words from which the fluctuations have dwindled away refers to the mind stuff of which the presented ideas have come to rest. And he takes just the example, the words as from a precious gem. And namaste, I and you make mention.